Files folder. Now, what do I mean by making sure your geometry is clean? Well, if we're not careful, if we overlook this step, we might run into an issue later down the road where we start to, let's say, refine skin deformations after the skeleton has been made, and we start to notice that, hey, our deformations don't quite look the way they should. Perhaps the model is shifting away from this neutral position, or perhaps it's something that we see even later down the process than that, where again things are not moving properly. So again, to avoid this step, what we can do is just make sure that our transform values are reset, and then at that point we can then confidently go in and start to build out our control system without having to worry about any annoying issues. So let's say we go ahead and get started. The first thing I'd like to do is go ahead and hide the light and camera in this scene, just so that they're not getting in the way. We'll go to the camera, head over to the eye icon, which allows us to toggle its visibility, and we'll go ahead and turn that off. We'll do the same thing for our light. Fantastic. Now watch this. Let's go ahead and grab the character's body, and as you can see, we have some very messy transform values here that we should clean up. So again, let's just go through and clear out all of these values. What I'll do is go ahead and use the middle mouse button to do a marquee selection around the entire model. Alright, sweet. Now with all pieces selected, we can then head over to our properties viewport, and we can go to freeze and choose all. Sweet. So as you can see, each center has been brought back to the origin, and take a look. No longer do we have any of those nasty values that we saw before. Good stuff. So this model is essentially ready to be skinned once we have, of course, a skeleton, and we'll start to create that in the following lesson. Something else I'd like to do before we close this lesson off is just make sure that there's a way to disable selection on our geometry at some point, because remember, when animators start to work, we just want them to select the control objects and nothing more, right? We don't want them to accidentally grab a piece of geometry and offset that from our neutral space, because of course that's going to cause some very annoying issues later down the production pipeline. So to avoid that, again, let's just make it very easy for them when it's time to animate our character. So again, we'll go ahead and grab all of our geometry. And now with each piece selected, we'll head over to our groups viewport. Sweet. So once we've done that, we'll go ahead and create a new group. Let's go ahead and name this Mesh. And then from there, we'll make sure that our mode is set to from selected items, and we'll click OK. Nice. If we were to expand this group, you'll notice that we have this items list that will show us all of our geometry. Super neat. And it's really easy to add to this, by the way. You can just go ahead and grab, let's say, a mesh that you'd like to add to your group, and then with the group highlighted, which you can highlight by simply control clicking it afterwards, you can then go ahead and right click and choose Add Items. Alright, sweet. So again, once we have all of our items stored in this group, we can just go ahead and right click, and then at that point we can go down to Members Selectable, and let's go ahead and set this to off. You'll now notice that we cannot select our model. Fantastic. So this is something that we want to do as one of our last steps, again, just to make sure that the character is truly ready to be animated. But at this point, this is a good time to stop the lesson. In the following lesson, I'd highly recommend that you have the wireframe of the model visible. That way, you know exactly where to place your joints for accurate deformations. If you do not see your wireframe, simply use the Control// key combination to go ahead and view it. Now if you'd like to hide your wireframe at any point, just go ahead and simply use / on the number pad. Cool. I'll go ahead and bring it back again. Hold down Control and / on the number pad. Fantastic. So again, as we start to create our joints, we'll use our topology just to make sure that they are actually being placed at the right spot along the mesh. If we do not do this, the problems in our deformations will be noticeable. We'll notice that we are not pivoting from the right point as the character deforms. Alright, but now what we'll do is go ahead and jump over to our side view. We could do that a few ways. We can go to our viewport menu, or we can use the hotkey 3 on our number pad. Alright, fantastic. So that will send us to our right view. Next, let's head over to our Setup tab underneath the Setup Viewport, and we'll grab the Skeleton tool. What I'd like to do first is start by creating a straight chain, and then we could start to adjust our joints as needed until they are placed in the correct spots. By keeping the chain straight, we essentially end up with a very clean orientation. Alright, so let's go ahead and get to it. Now, we can create a straight chain by enabling our snapping tool. If we were to go ahead and press F11, you'll notice that we can get to our snap settings from here. We could also use the hotkey X to enable snapping. We'll make sure that this is set to grid snapping. And then once we've done that, we can go ahead and click away to exit our snapping menu. Alright, sweet. So now just follow the crosshair. We'll start right here at the character center. Go ahead and click, click, click. So we have a few spine joints. We'll create another joint for the character's upper torso. And then one for the base of the neck. Let's go ahead and adjust our camera so we can move up to the character's head. Sweet. And then we'll place one at the very top of the head, and this just gives us a sense of direction. So as the head bone starts to rotate, we know what direction it's pointed in. Sweet. So everything looks pretty nice from here. Let's say we go ahead and head over to our perspective view. Again, we can go to our viewport menu, or we can use the hotkey period on the number pad. Fantastic. So from here, as long as we are under the skeleton menu, if you wanted to, you can go to Tool Properties and you can change the skeleton mode to, let's say, Insert if you needed to insert any more joints. But I think we're pretty good with what we have. So if anything, we can go ahead and now exit the skeleton tool by simply dropping it with the space bar. Now, if you wanted to go in and start adjusting your joints without affecting the rest of the hierarchy, because you'll notice that if I start to kind of move any joints within the hierarchy, you can see how the rest of the chain kind of follows. Each joint is parented to the one underneath, and this is our FK hierarchy, of course. So again, if you would like to move them independently, here's what you can do. Simply go ahead and move to Centers mode. And now watch this. When we grab the center of a joint, as we start to move it, you'll see that only the joint's position is affected and nothing more. Sweet. So I'll go ahead and take this chest joint and I'll move that up just a little bit higher so we get a more accurate pivot point. Nice. And everything else looks great. I think that this will deform very well. Good stuff. So knowing that, let's go ahead and do this. Let's start to rename our joints. What I'll do first is go ahead and turn off snapping. Let's go ahead and press F11. We'll go ahead and click on snapping here at the top. Sweet. And now we'll go to items. We'll go ahead and find our chain. We could always go ahead and press the F key with one of our joints selected. Sweet. And we'll start from the top of the hierarchy. So once we have the first joint selected, go ahead and get that renamed. There we go. So I'll name this first one bind _ root And by doing so, we know exactly where the character center is, and we also know that this should be a part of the character skin eventually. Sweet. Let's go ahead and move to the next joint and get that renamed. So we could always call this bind underscore spine underscore A. Sweet. We'll go to the next, and this one will be bind spine B. And then for the chest, let's go ahead and move to that joint next. That's going to be bind underscore chest. It's very important that we do this step because when we start to refine our deformations, we know exactly where we are redistributing weight to. Let's say we go ahead and expand the chest hierarchy. We can hold down Shift and click to expand the entire system. So that'll help us save a little bit of time and get to these joints a bit faster. Alright, so we're now going to move to the next joint. This is for the character's neck. So that's going to be bind neck. Then we get to the head bone. So that's bind head. And now what about this end joint? Now by default, they do not get added to the skin. So knowing that, we can go ahead and use a prefix of BE for bone end underscore head for its name. Alright, super cool. Also make sure to go back to items mode. So we're no longer in centers mode. That way we don't throw off the position of any of our joints. I think this is really good. Alright, super cool. Now if you wanted to go in and adjust the radius of any of these, it's very simple to do that. Simply go ahead and grab the joint that you'd like to adjust, head over to your display tab, and then you'd go to locator shapes. So yes, each joint is actually a locator. Now from here, you'll notice that you have this radius parameter that you can use to start adjusting the size of your joint. So this one is at about 40 millimeters. If you decide on that value, you could always go ahead and copy it, go to the next joint, and paste. Sweet. So I might do that for the next one. And sometimes this is helpful just so that you can actually see your joint. Super cool. Then we also have settings for the connection from one joint to the next. So if you wanted to, you can adjust the width and height of your joint system that way. You'll notice that this is set to auto size. If I go ahead and turn that off, now we have access to the width and height. You might go ahead and link both before you start adjusting the width and height. That way you can move them simultaneously. Cool. So I'll bring this to about, again, 40 millimeters, and we can do the same thing for the other joints. I'll go ahead and turn off auto size. With auto size, as we start to adjust the length of the chain, that will automatically resize the width and height. But sometimes I like to just manually go in and adjust these properties. So again, we decided on 40 millimeters. Let's go ahead and put in that value. Sweet, and we can do this one more time. I'll turn off auto size. We'll go ahead and link both. Now go ahead and set one to 40. When we hit enter, the other will be set to the same value. Fantastic. So that's it for this lesson. We managed to get our torso joint renamed. So in the following lesson, so that we can get the preferred angle correct on our chain. The preferred angle is what tells the software how to bend our joint system once we add inverse kinematics. So this is super important, right? Let's go ahead and get to it. I'll press the 3 key to jump back to our right view. We'll grab the skeleton tool. And what we'll do is go ahead and click near our root. Eventually we'll go ahead and snap this back. Next, let's go ahead and create our knee joint. So go ahead and click. And if you want to reposition this, you could always just go ahead and left click and drag the center of your joint. So we need to make sure that this bend exists in the chain. Again, this is what defines the preferred angle. Cool. And now we can go ahead and create a joint for the ankle. Nice. And we'll continue this down the foot. So let's go ahead and click and create the next joint. You'll notice that if we were to go ahead and click forward and then start to pull this down, we could actually use this type of technique to correct the joint's orientation. So it's something that I like to do just to make sure that the orientation is consistent throughout. Now, as you can see here, we have one joint where Y is pointed back, whereas the root is pointed forward. So how can we correct something like this? Let me go ahead and show you. Let's go ahead and press Control Z a few times to undo back. Alright, sweet. So now we'll go in and click to create our next joint. Again, we can go ahead and bring this forward and then pull this down just to make sure that it gets added in the right spot. And now when I'm ready to create the next joint, just to make sure Y is pointed in the right direction, I'll go ahead and click forward first. So you can see how Y is pointed up. This looks great because now, watch this, when we start to pull this down, you can see how the software will allow us to correct the orientation of this joint as we adjust its child. So now Y is pointed the same way the parent's Y-axis points. Cool. So again, we can go ahead and do the same thing for this time the foot bone. Nice. And then the toe. And take a look at how clean this is. Super exciting stuff. This will make it a lot easier for us when it comes time to rigging this chain because the orientation is consistent. Fantastic. And if you ever wanted to change those settings, by the way, you can do so under your tool properties. And you can learn more about this in Introduction to Rigging in Modo. But this looks great. So at this point, I'll go ahead and drop the tool, hitting the space bar, and we'll hit the period key on our number pad to jump back to our perspective view. Again, we can make sure that our chain is going to be placed in the correct spot right here in our mesh. But before that, let's make sure that we center this to our root. The reason why is because we want to prevent buckling in the knees when we start to rotate our root back and forth. So here's a quick trick to prevent that type of behavior, because buckling can be really nasty to clean up. We'd have to keep adjusting our knee control, and at best the animation might still look wobbly. So all we need to do is go ahead and align this to our root joint. We can always work with a drop action. I'll make sure this is set to match position. Sweet. And then from there, we'll go ahead and press the F key to find our joint. Let's now go ahead and left click and drag on top of our root. So now it has been centered. And now it's just a matter of grabbing the move tool and translating this over. So we'll bring this over to the left leg. Alright, sweet. Now once we've done that, we can basically go in and reorient this chain. So what I'll do is press the E key to grab the rotate tool, and we'll rotate this in our Y-axis. Alright, so take a look. This fits nicely inside of this leg. Now we'll just need to reorient the ankle. Let's go ahead and bring this back in the opposite direction. I'd like to go ahead and use world mode, so it's very easy to kind of tilt this back over. Can do that in a very clean way. So it flows down the foot. Cool. Now at this point, it's just a matter of adjusting our joints just to make sure that they fit nicely inside of the volume of the leg. So I'll go and grab the move tool, the W key. Let's make sure this is set to local mode, so we're moving locally along the chain. Again, this is super important because when we eventually add inverse kinematics, if there is a weird continuity issue, if there's a weird bend, and let's say the knee, that will be noticeable when we add inverse kinematics. So we're just trying to prevent that. Let's go ahead and pull this back. There we go. Now we can go ahead and grab the ankle, and we can do the same thing here, just kind of pull this down. Sweet. And there you have it. So at this point, what I'd like to do is go in and rename each of our joints. So this first one here is going to be bind underscore L, since it's on the left half of our model, underscore thigh. Sweet. And we get to the next one, and this is going to be bind L shin. And there we have it. So what I'll do is go ahead and pause the video and rename the others, and you can have a look at my naming convention after I'm done with that step. And there we have it. So I managed to rename each joint. There's bind L thigh, shin, ankle, foot, and BE toe. Remember, the end joint does not get added to the skin. Sweet. Now, how can we mirror this across and save time? Well, let's go ahead and grab our root joint of this leg system, which is bind L thigh, and with that selected, we can then go ahead and basically jump to the end of our setup tab. So once we get to that end, we have a few mirroring options. Now, mirror hierarchy is actually going to create a copy of our chain and mirror that over, whereas with mirror X, it's going to take that exact item and mirror it. So in this case, we want to use mirror X, and we of course want to mirror along the X-axis. This is the axis that allows us to bring this chain to the opposite half of the model. So what I'll do is go ahead and use mirror hierarchy X, and there we have it. So that saves us a lot of time, right? If you ever needed to mirror in other axes, just go ahead and left click and hold, and now you have other options here. Sweet. So at this point, it's just a matter of renaming our new chain. Let's go ahead and select the root of that system, and we'll want to change our L's to R's, and then we'll get rid of the to suffix. So let's go ahead and do that for the other joints. Remember that to is there just to let us know that, hey, this is a copy. So if we need this object, we'll go ahead and clean up its naming convention, but if we don't need the copy, we'll just go ahead and delete it. Fantastic. Well, I'll go ahead and leave. So that's what this bone will be used for. And here's how we can create it. No need to use the skeleton tool. Let's go ahead and grab our root joint. And now with it selected, if we were to go ahead and right click, we could then go ahead and duplicate this, but not the hierarchy, just the joint. So once we've done that, let's go ahead and press the F key to find the object. There it is. I'll now go ahead and take the move tool, and I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this once again and translate the duplicate down, so that'll be the end of our chain. We could also use Control D to duplicate, by the way, so we don't have to right click all the time. Let's go ahead and translate this down to the end of the pelvis. Alright, cool. So now it's just a matter of taking this lower joint and parenting it to the joint above it, the one that we duplicated first. Let's go ahead and control click the top joint last. And now when we press the P key, what we've done here is we have told Modo what is the child and what should be the parent. So whatever we select last, once we hit the P key, once we run the parent operation, that will be the parent, the object that's last selected. Alright, cool stuff. Now I'd like to go ahead and rename these two joints. So this first one here is simply going to be bind pelvis. Let's go ahead and open up the hierarchy so we can get to the end joint. And that's going to be BE pelvis. Cool. I'd also like to make sure that the radius of the pelvis joint is a little bit larger than the root, so it's easy to go in and select between the two systems. So here's what we'll do. We'll go back to our display viewport. From there we'll go to locator shapes, and we'll increase the radius of the pelvis just a little bit more. Let's say to about 70. Alright, sweet. So there we have it. And now at this point we need to make sure that the pelvis is underneath the root hierarchy. So again, we grab the child first, and then we'll go ahead and control click the parent, and then press the P key. Nice. Wonderful stuff. So when we grab our root joint, we should be able to move this entire system now. And what we can do at this point is parent the legs. So let's go ahead and grab the two thighs. We'll shift select the pelvis bone and press the P key. So now they are connected. You'll notice that we have this line that connects the joints to our pelvis instead of having this display that we have for the other joints. Whenever we see this kind of thinned out line, this simply means that we have multiple children getting connected to a parent. So that's why we see this thinner line, again, that connects the two thighs. But watch this, when we start to now rotate our pelvis bone, the legs will follow. Super cool stuff. We're making great progress. Let's say we stop the lesson here, and in the following lesson, we'll get started. And here's why. Let's go ahead and press the 3 key, again, on our number pad, so we can jump to the side view. As you can see, it's going to be pretty tricky to create our chain from this angle, especially considering that we have a few joints that kind of get in the way of us creating this arm chain. And not only that, but keep in mind that the arm is at an angle right now, so this length we see is a bit misleading, right? So for that reason, let's go ahead and press the 2 key to jump to our front view, and we'll start here. Let's go ahead and grab the skeleton tool. We'll click at the left shoulder, and we'll click once again at the left wrist. Now what about the elbow? Let me go ahead and show you how to segment this with the insert tool. So again, don't drop the tool just yet. Let's go to our tool properties. We'll switch add to insert. And now we can basically go ahead and click right here at the root. And when I do that, you can see how Modo is going to add a joint right here at the center between these two. Very convenient. Alright, sweet. So from here, I'd like to go ahead and jump to the perspective view. Let's go ahead and press the period key. Alright, awesome stuff. So at this point, I'd basically like to go ahead and now drop the tool. Let's go ahead and grab the elbow. Keep in mind we need to establish our preferred angle, right? So all we have to do at this point is go ahead and grab our move tool. Let's make sure it's set to local mode. We'll then use centers to just go ahead and kind of pull this back. Let's go ahead and grab the center of this joint and fix its position. And there we have it. So that looks much better. For the wrist, I think we can go ahead and bring that forward. Let's go ahead and jump back to items mode, select the wrist. And as you can see, it's currently oriented to the world. That's something that happens with end joints here in the software. But let me go ahead and show you how to correct this so it follows the same orientation as its parent. If we were to go to our channels viewport, take a look at this, you'll notice that, well, here we have a rotate list that we can go ahead and clean up. What I mean by that is, if we go ahead and select our rotate list here, and then hit the delete key, what that's going to do is it's going to remove all of those rotate values, and it's essentially going to reset the joint so that its orientation matches its parent. Cool. So at this point, I might like to go ahead and take this joint and move that forward. Another option we have is to go ahead and take the elbow, grab our rotate tool, just kind of rotate that forward a bit more so that the wrist is centered. So that works out great as well. Nice. Okay, so once we've managed to do that, let's go ahead and take the time to rename our joints. So we already have an idea as to the naming convention we'll use. Let's go ahead and press the F key to find our shoulder joint, and we'll get to renaming this. That's going to be bind L shoulder. Sweet. And then from there, we'll go ahead and jump to the elbow. Now, we could always pick walk. If we were to go ahead and press the down arrow right here in the viewport, notice we can start to move down the hierarchy. Of course, if we use the up arrow, we could start to move up the hierarchy of the selected item. So I find that to be super useful. So we get to the elbow now. Let's go ahead and press the F key to go ahead and find the object here in the items viewport, or feel free to use your properties viewport. Either way, this is going to be bind L elbow, and then we have the wrist, and we will skin to this joint, so that's going to be bind L wrist. Alright, fantastic. So now that we have these renamed, we can then go ahead and work on the clavicle bone. That way we can truly animate the shoulders so that she can create, let's say, a shoulder shrug type of pose. So that'll be fun. What we'll do is go ahead and jump back to our front view. Let's go ahead and press the 2 key. Let's grab our skeleton tool. Alright, sweet. So from there, I'll turn on snapping with the X key. It should already be set to grid snap. We'll go ahead and click where the rotation should start, and we'll click once again where the chain should end. Alright, fantastic. From there, I'll go ahead and drop the tool, and then we'll jump back to our perspective view to see where this gets placed inside of our geometry. Now I'd like to make sure that this is more aligned to our shoulder joint. Again, just to make sure we get the correct types of deformations when we start to rotate this joint. So how can we do that? Well, watch this. Let's make sure our drop action is set to match position. We'll then go ahead and find our joint. Here it is. And now it's basically just a matter of dropping this right on top of our shoulder bone. Once we have done that, let's then go ahead and take the joint and start kind of pulling that back. I'll go ahead and turn off snapping at this point. Let's go ahead and press the X key to do so. We'll go ahead and just kind of translate this back. All right, sweet. So at this point, and I'm just making sure that this is truly in the correct spot. We don't want it too close to the center, otherwise it's going to create a lot of collapsing around the neck when we start to rotate this. So it should be right outside of the neck if we were to go ahead and draw a line from this joint up. Sweet. And then we can go ahead and take our end joint and align that to our shoulder. So again, we can use a drop action to do that. Let's just go ahead and drop that on top of the shoulder bone. Fantastic. So everything is nice and clean now. Great. And then from there, we can go ahead and get these renamed. This is using the current naming convention we see here. And that's simply due to the fact that when I started to create this chain, I actually had this joint selected. So you can see how the auto renaming system works here in Modo. There's another way to do that. If you were under your skeleton tool and went to tool properties, you'll notice that you have some naming information here that you can use. So let's say if you were working on a more generic type of rig, you can go ahead and use a naming convention that would be more suitable for that type of asset. Alright, sweet, but I'll go ahead and jump back to the first tab here, so we can go ahead and drop our skeleton tool at this point. I'd now like to just make sure that these two get renamed, so that's going to be bind L clavicle, and then we'll rename the end joint, so that's going to be BE. Yes, we will not skin to this one, so that's BEL clavicle. Alright, fantastic. Now we can go ahead and take our shoulder and we can go ahead and parent to the end of our clavicle system. So we'll grab the clavicle last, that's BEL clavicle, and we'll press the P key. Wonderful. Alright, so this is a good stopping point. Now in the following lesson, we'll basically get started on our hand chain, and then once that's finished, we'll then be ready to mirror this across to finish the skeleton.